So during opening statements, the prosecution basically described everything that happened leading up to the fight that happened at the MGM Grand during the Keffe D trial, and what specifically went down, Keffe D's involvement, how Zip Martin was involved, who was in the car at the time that this happened, and how that played out into leading up to the Tupac shooting. Now we're going to get into the actual court coverage, and you're going to hear from the prosecutor why they believe Keffe D was connected to this, and even talk about his gang affiliations. It's crazy to hear all the connections, and I think the craziest part about this is that Keffe D really laid out everything for the police in this case. The only thing we have to ask is Keffe D telling the truth? Is this actually what happened? And are there things to show that what he's saying is actually true? Make sure you guys stick around with us, subscribe to the channel to watch more trial coverage and see how this plays out for Keffe D. Here we go.
On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and other people that were with that group, ran into a person named Orlando Anderson. And Orlando Anderson is the defendant's nephew. And when they encountered Orlando Anderson sitting by himself, they attacked him. That attack was captured on video.
Man was wearing a whole suit and a hat. And
Then, a few hours later, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight drive down Flamingo Road to Club 662, where Tupac is scheduled to perform a concert. Then 2.5 hours later, after Tupac and Suge engaged in the beating of Orlando Anderson, they are gunned down. Tupac is gunned down in a drive-by shooting from a white Cadillac in an act of revenge.
Right.
During those 2.5 hours, you will learn that the defendant was escalating and planning the retribution for the beating of his beloved nephew. Now, let's be clear. Dwayne Davis did not pull the trigger. But what he did do was plan the retaliation for the beating of his nephew.
Allegedly.
You will learn that Dwayne Davis got the gun. You will learn that he got into a white Cadillac. You will learn when the opportunity presented itself for retribution, Dwayne Davis made sure that the shooters were armed and ready to execute their revenge. And remarkably, you will learn that from Dwayne Davis himself. But to understand what happened on September 7th, 1996, on the streets of Las Vegas, we need to go about 275 miles west to the city of Compton, California. What you'll learn is that Compton is about 10 square miles. But in the mid-1990s, those 10 square miles were occupied by over 30 gangs claiming its territory. And important to this case, there are two gangs.
Crazy times.
Mob Piru and the Southside Compton groups. Let's talk a little bit about the Mob Piru. The Mob Piru is a group that associated with the color red. And you'll hear that Suge Knight, the person who was driving Tupac Shakur that night, grew up in the neighborhood of Mob Piru. But by the mid-1990s, he had become a very successful CEO of the record label Death Row Records. By night, the person by driving because where he came from, you'll hear that Suge Knight continued to employ Mob Piru gang members as part of Death Row. They would act as unofficial security, and other times they would engage in, let's call them other acts, on behalf of Suge Knight. But Death Row in the mid-1990s, record labels around. They had artists such as Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre,
All of them.
and of course, Tupac Shakur. And in 1996, Tupac Shakur was maybe the largest and biggest, most successful rapper around. He had just sold, released All Eyes on Me, a double album that was met with huge success. Additionally, Tupac Shakur was a movie star, having appeared in a number of movies in critically acclaimed roles.
He was Drake before Drake was
He
Drake.
has at times been referred to as an icon. But for the purposes of this case, what you need to know is that Tupac Shakur was not a gangster. He was a hip-hop artist associated with the Mob Piru. Now, the other gang that's important to know here is the Southside Compton Crips. And when it comes to Southside, Dwayne Keffe D. Davis was the leader of the Burris Street faction of the Southside Compton Crips. And while Suge Knight rose to prominence in his neighborhood, Dwayne Davis rose to prominence in his neighborhood because he was a very successful, large-scale drug trafficker. And he moves up in the world of gangs by bringing in money to the neighborhood. The other thing you'll learn is that Orlando Baby Lane Anderson was his nephew and also a highly respected member of the Southside Compton Crips. Now, as part of this case, you're going to hear another name. Eric Zip Martin. Now, Eric Zip Martin is not a member of the Southside Compton Crips. In fact, he's based out of New York. He's involved in the drug trade and knows Dwayne Davis as a result of both their involvements in the drug trade. Dwayne Davis from the West Coast, Eric Zip Martin from the East Coast. And one of the connections that Dwayne Davis gets through his association with Zip Martin is with Sean Puffy Combs, who was then the CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment.
Not Diddy. Oh,
Sean
man.
Combs wanted some security when he came out to the West Coast. He was worried about Mob Piru. He was worried about the members of Death Row Records. And so Dwayne Keffe D. Davis agreed to be around to act as unofficial security for Sean Combs and his artists when they came out west.
And I hate to interrupt opening statements, but for anybody who doesn't know, one of the alleged conspiracies around this is that Diddy had some impact on this situation and benefit a lot of not only the elimination of Tupac, but Biggie. Some say in that case, again, that's alleged. I don't know if we'll ever hear anything about that.
Particularly to ensure there are no problems with Mob Piru and Death Row Records. And this took a rivalry between Mob Piru and Southside Compton Crips and escalated it. And those tensions boiled over in the Lakewood Mall in the summer of 1996.
Mm-hmm.
There, you'll hear that Trayvon Lane, a member of the Mob Piru, associated with Death Row Records, was there with other members of Mob Piru in order to do some shopping. Lakewood Mall was a mall nearby Compton. You'll also hear that Baby Lane Anderson, Orlando Anderson, the defendant's nephew, was there. Now, Trayvon Lane that day was wearing a chain with a Death Row medallion. And there was a fight that occurs between the Mob Piru group and the Southside Compton Crips. And at one point, that chain is pulled off Trayvon Lane's neck. Now, what happened to that chain is an issue of much dispute. Not everybody agrees with it. But the act of disrespect of pulling the Death Row chain and the brawl that occurs further escalates this heated rivalry. And what you'll learn is that these two men, Trayvon Lane and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, they encounter each other again. This time in Las Vegas. So that brings us back up to September 7th, 1996, here in Las Vegas. Again, Mike Tyson is fighting Bruce Sullivan. He disposes of him in less than in a round. Doesn't take a full round. And then after the fight, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the people that are here with, they leave. And among his group is Trayvon Lane. And that is why this fight occurs. Trayvon Lane and the death row group sees Orlando Anderson standing by himself, and they decide to attack him in retribution for what happened at the Lakewood Mall. You'll see Orlando Anderson's on the bottom of that group. You see security coming, trying to break this up. And then you'll see Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and that group exit the MGM Grand. Now, Orlando Anderson was by himself because when Dwayne Davis purchased the tickets for the Bruce Sullivan fight, he got them through a scalper. So everybody that came with Dwayne Davis were seated separately throughout the fight. And so Orlando Anderson was, at that time, by himself. You'll see that Mr. Shakur, Mr. Knight, and his group leave the MGM Grand. And you'll see that Orlando Anderson, after being held by security, is questioned for a bit, asked if he wants to press charges. He decides he doesn't want to participate in any type of prosecution, and that he doesn't need medical attention. Dwayne Davis hears about this beating. And what you will hear is that in his world, there is no question that a response is required. And you will hear from Dwayne Davis what happens next. Because what happened over the next 2.5 hours is something Dwayne Davis would later describe himself in the secret 2008 interview from his attorney's office with the federal task force. And we'll talk about that interview and the circumstances surrounding that later. But we'll hear about what the next 2.5 hours was. So, what we learn is that Dwayne Davis is upset about the beating of his nephew. And frankly, that's not an unusual response. What's unusual is the next steps Dwayne Davis takes. Unusual for the normal person, maybe not unusual for in-gang culture. He is going to organize a retaliation, that this beating cannot go unanswered. Then he runs into a person named Zip Martin. Remember the Zip Martin that was the connection with Bad Boy Entertainment from New York? And Zip Martin tells him that he has a gun.
Hey, where do you go to? What do you tell Zip right now? You tell Zip, hey, we're going to go handle this shit or whatever?
Yeah, like, if y'all want us to come, like, you know what them motherfuckers that they was they gonna get 662 club.
Who's saying that?
Everybody.
Everybody out there?
Yeah, everybody. You want to come to
Well,
that?
how do you know that Zip's got a gun? Does he tell
You
you?
know it's in the lobby, I met him in the lobby. I got one.
Do you ask him? Do you have one? Or he just tells you, yeah, I got one?
Yeah, that's when they asked me, we need some help. I said, yeah, like, yeah, okay, cool.
I don't know what he gave.
Yeah.
So later, Dwayne Davis organizes 2 vehicles to go over to the 662 Club. Before that, he gets the gun from Zip Martin. He goes out to his Mercedes-Benz, gets the gun from Zip Martin, and then after some time, he assembles 2 cars to go to 662 to violently confront Tupac. And you'll hear that Dwayne Davis and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, they go in a white Cadillac and they go to Club 662, waiting for Tupac Shakur, waiting for Suge Knight, waiting for this violent confrontation.
And how did
What
they know
learned
that?
is that Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight don't show up while they're there.
We went up to the 626, they didn't show up. We waited about 15, 20 minutes, they didn't show up. So, it's like, let's go get some liquor. We stopped at the liquor store. I got out the van and then I jumped in the Cadillac.
So what you hear Dwayne Davis say is he got out of the Cadillac. And the plan at that point is to go to a liquor store, get some booze, and then go back to the Las Vegas Strip and party. What the original intention was before Orlando Anderson was beaten at the MGM Grand. But on the way back to the Las Vegas Strip, they see a caravan of cars. And that caravan included Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. And in that white Cadillac, before the shooting occurs, Dwayne Davis explains that the driver is Terrence T. Brown. In the rear driver's side is DeAndre Dre, or Big Dre Smith. In the rear passenger side is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And that Dwayne Davis himself, KVD, is in the front passenger side.
And also, just some clarification on this. The other 3 people that were allegedly involved in this, they're all dead at this point. The only one remaining right now is Keffe D, which is why he's the only one standing trial.